For most people today, this idea sounds absurd. People in the Middle Ages, surrounded by dirt, animals, and no modern medicine, were often metabolically healthier than we are. No calorie tracking, no supplements, no superfoods. And yet, rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, and autoimmune disorders were dramatically lower. This is where the story begins. Not with nostalgia, but with a contradiction. Medieval Europeans lived hard lives. They worked long hours, endured famine, cold winters, and infections that could kill in days. And yet, when historians and bioarchaeologists examine skeletal remains, dental records, and historical accounts, a strange pattern emerges. Chronic metabolic disease was rare. Cavities existed, but widespread insulin resistance did not. Joint wear showed labor, not inflammation. Arteries, when preserved, lacked the calcification that now appears in people decades younger. So the question isn't whether medieval life was better. It wasn't. The real question is more uncomfortable. Why are modern humans, cleaner, richer, medically advanced, sicker in ways our ancestors almost never were? Something changed. And it wasn't human biology. For centuries, bread was not a side dish. It was food. In medieval Europe, up to 70% of daily calories came from bread and grain-based foods. Rye, barley, spelt, emmer, einkorn, ground with stone, fermented slowly, baked fresh. Bread wasn't optional. It was survival. And yet, descriptions of medieval peasants don't read like medical case studies of bloating, brain fog, and blood sugar crashes. That alone should disturb us. Today, bread is often blamed as the villain. Gluten is feared. Carbohydrates are demonized. Grains are accused of inflaming the gut and destroying metabolic health. But medieval people consumed more grains than we do, not less, and somehow avoided the epidemic of chronic illness we now accept as normal. So again, the question sharpens. What the hell changed? The convenient answer is modern life. Less movement, more sugar, more calories. But that explanation collapses under scrutiny. Medieval peasants consumed large amounts of carbohydrates. They drank ale daily. They ate porridge morning and night. Sugar intake was low, yes, but total carb intake was high. And yet obesity was almost non-existent. The difference wasn't quantity, it was quality, processing, and time. Medieval food systems were brutally simple. No additives, no preservatives, no shelf-life engineering. Grain was grown locally, adapted to soil and climate, harvested once a year, and eaten within months. Flour went rancid quickly. Bread staled fast, which meant bread was baked constantly, fresh, fermented, alive. Fermentation wasn't a trend. It was necessity. Dough was left to sit not for flavor, but because it had to. Yeast was wild. Time was non-negotiable. During that time, something important happened. Enzymes and microbes began breaking down complex starches, neutralizing anti-nutrients and partially digesting proteins long before the bread ever entered a human stomach. The medieval gut didn't face raw grain. It faced pre-digested food. Contrast that with modern food. Modern bread is engineered, not grown. Grain varieties are selected for yield, uniformity, and mechanical harvest, not digestibility. Flour is milled at high speed, stripped of fiber, bleached, fortified artificially, and stabilized to sit on shelves for months or years. Dough is forced to rise in hours using industrial yeast, enzymes, and chemical accelerators. Time, the single most important ingredient, is eliminated. The human digestive system did not evolve for this, and the consequences don't show up immediately. They show up slowly. Insulin resistance, gut permeability, low-grade inflammation, autoimmune confusion. Diseases that don't kill quickly, but follow you for life. Medieval people died of infections, injuries, and famine. Modern people live long enough to be destroyed by chronic metabolic stress. This isn't romanticism, it's trade-off. There's another uncomfortable truth we avoid. Medieval diets were monotonous. They didn't snack constantly. There was no grazing from dawn to midnight. Meals were structured by daylight and labor. Hunger was familiar, not pathological, but normal. The modern body never rests. Constant eating means constant insulin signaling. Constant insulin signaling means the body forgets how to listen. Medieval metabolism experienced cycles, feast and scarcity, work and rest, that modern systems aggressively suppress. But even that isn't the full story. Because when researchers recreate medieval-style diets using modern ingredients, the health benefits largely disappear. Same macronutrients, same calories, different outcome, which tells us something critical. The problem is not carbs. It is not gluten. It is not calories. The problem is industrial processing layered onto an ancient biology. Medieval people ate food that still behaved like food. Modern people eat products that only look like food. And the body knows the difference. This story is not about blaming individuals. Medieval peasants didn't make better choices. They had no choices. Their food system constrained them into eating whole, slow, local, minimally processed food, and their bodies adapted beautifully to that reality. Our system constrains us in the opposite direction. Highly processed calories are cheaper, faster, and more profitable. Shelf life matters more than digestion. Uniformity matters more than resilience. Convenience matters more than biology. And then we act surprised when the body rebels. The tragedy is that we don't see this as a system failure. We see it as personal weakness. You're bloated because you're sensitive. You're diabetic because you overate. You're inflamed because you aged. Medieval people aged too. They just didn't rot metabolically while doing it. This is the moment where the investigation truly begins. Because if medieval food protected metabolic health despite hardship, then the villain cannot be comfort. It must be something deeper, something structural, embedded into how modern food is grown, processed, and sold. In the next part of this story, we will dismantle modern food itself, ingredient by ingredient, and expose why the things we eat every day behave less like nourishment and more like biochemical experiments. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. To understand why modern humans are chronically ill while medieval people were not, we have to stop blaming the eater and start interrogating the food itself. Because what we call food today would be almost unrecognizable to someone from the Middle Ages. Let's start with grain, the foundation of medieval survival and the centerpiece of modern dietary fear. Medieval wheat was not a single thing. It was a population. Einkorn, emmer, spelt, landrace wheats, genetically diverse, regionally adapted, imperfect, inconsistent. Fields were chaotic ecosystems, not controlled factories. Crops failed often, but when they succeeded, the grain carried resilience built over centuries of local adaptation. Modern wheat is the opposite. It is uniform, optimized, standardized, selected not for digestion, but for yield, mechanical harvesting, and baking performance. Gluten content has been aggressively increased, not because humans needed it, but because machines and industrial bakeries did. Gluten itself is not one protein. It's a family of proteins. Medieval grains contained simpler gluten structures, easier to break down. Modern wheat contains dense, elastic gluten networks that resist digestion, perfect for fluffy loaves, disastrous for sensitive guts. But wheat genetics are only the first layer. The real damage happens after harvest. In medieval times, grain was cut, dried, ground with stone, and eaten quickly. Stone milling preserved the germ and bran, along with fats that spoiled fast. That spoilage was a feature, not a bug. It enforced freshness. Modern milling removes the germ and bran to prevent rancidity. What remains is a starch-heavy powder stripped of fiber, micronutrients, and natural fats. To compensate, synthetic vitamins are added back, a process politely called enrichment. This is nutritional theater. And then comes fermentation, or rather, the absence of it. Medieval bread rose slowly, sometimes over days. Wild yeast and bacteria pre-digested starches, broke down phytic acid, reduced lectins, and partially dismantled gluten. By the time bread was eaten, the digestive work had already begun. Modern bread is rushed. Industrial yeast forces dough to rise in 1 or 2 hours. No time for microbial digestion, no time for enzyme action. The bread looks similar, but biologically, it is raw. This is where the gut begins to suffer. The human digestive system evolved expecting help from fermentation. When that help disappears, undigested proteins and starches reach the intestines. The immune system notices. Inflammation follows. Over time, tolerance breaks down. This is why so many people say, "I can't eat bread anymore." What they mean is, my body can't handle industrial shortcuts. But bread is only one example. Look at fat. Medieval fats came from animals that moved, grazed, and ate diverse plants. Butter, lard, tallow, rich in fat-soluble vitamins and stable under heat. No seed oils, no chemical extraction. Modern fats are dominated by industrial seed oils, cheap, shelf-stable, and biologically novel. Extracted with heat and solvents, deodorized, refined, and oxidized before they ever reach your plate. These oils integrate into cell membranes and alter inflammatory signaling at the most basic level. Medieval inflammation came from infection. Modern inflammation comes from food. Then there's exposure. Medieval agriculture used no synthetic chemicals. Crop loss was real, but chemical load was zero. Modern grain farming relies heavily on herbicides and desiccants, sprayed directly onto crops before harvest to speed drying and increase efficiency. Residues remain, not in toxic doses that kill quickly, but in chronic doses that confuse hormones, disrupt gut bacteria, and burden detox systems over decades. Again, the body adapts until it can't. Now layer all of this onto modern eating patterns. Medieval people ate when food was available. Meals were spaced. Snacking was rare. The digestive system had time to reset. Insulin rose and fell. Metabolic pathways rested. Modern humans eat constantly. Breakfast snacks, lunch snacks, dinner snacks. Ultra-processed foods are engineered to be eaten mindlessly, quickly, and repeatedly. Every bite triggers insulin. Insulin never rests. Cells stop listening. Type 2 diabetes isn't a disease of excess sugar. It's a disease of constant signaling. The medieval body experienced stress, yes, but not metabolic overload. There is a cruel irony here. Modern food is designed to be safe, pathogen-free, shelf-stable, consistent. And it succeeds at that goal. You won't die from bread mold, you won't starve in winter, but safety replaced nourishment. In eliminating microbial risk, we eliminated microbial partnership. In eliminating spoilage, we eliminated time. In eliminating variation, we eliminated resilience. We didn't make food better, we made it predictable. And the human body does not thrive on predictability alone. This is why attempts to fix modern diets often fail. People remove gluten, carbs, fat, meat, chasing symptoms instead of causes. They swap one industrial product for another with a cleaner label. But medieval health did not come from restriction. It came from alignment. Alignment between food, biology, time, and environment. The industrial system broke that alignment, quietly, efficiently, and profitably. And then it told us the damage was our fault. This is the moment where blame must be reassigned. Not to individuals, not to willpower, but to a system that optimized calories per acre while ignoring calories per cell. In the final part of this story, we'll look at what happens when modern humans reintroduce ancient principles: slow fermentation, whole grains, real fats, metabolic rhythm, and why, when done correctly, the body begins to heal in ways medicine alone cannot explain. Because the goal is not to live like medieval peasants. The goal is to remember what they never had to forget. When modern humans reintroduce ancient food principles, not as trends but as systems, something strange happens. Symptoms disappear, not slowly, not symbolically, but measurably. People who believed they were gluten intolerant suddenly tolerate long-fermented sourdough with no bloating. Blood sugar levels stabilize without carbohydrate elimination. Autoimmune markers soften. Digestion becomes quiet, a sensation so unfamiliar that many describe it as unsettling at first. Because for the modern body, not being inflamed feels abnormal. This is where science quietly confirms what history already showed. Long fermentation changes food at a molecular level. It reduces phytic acid, freeing minerals like zinc, magnesium, and iron. It breaks down complex starches into forms that feed beneficial gut bacteria instead of spiking blood glucose. It partially dismantles problematic protein structures before they ever reach the immune system. This is not theory. It's biochemistry. And when modern studies isolate variables, same calories, same macronutrients, different processing, the results are consistent. Traditional grain preparation produces lower insulin responses, improved gut permeability, and reduced inflammatory markers compared to industrial bread. The medieval advantage wasn't magic. It was time plus microbes. The same pattern appears beyond bread. When people replace industrial seed oils with traditional fats, butter, olive oil, tallow, inflammatory signals decrease. Cell membranes regain structural integrity. Hormonal signaling becomes clearer. Satiety returns. When meal timing becomes rhythmic instead of constant, fewer snacks, longer fasting windows, insulin sensitivity improves without caloric restriction. When food stops being hyper-palatable and engineered, appetite self-regulates. None of this requires perfection. It requires alignment. And alignment reveals something deeply unsettling. Many modern diseases are not inevitable. They are manufactured side effects. This doesn't mean medieval people were healthier in every way. They suffered infections we no longer fear. They lacked antibiotics, surgery, and sanitation. They died young from causes we now prevent easily. But they did not suffer metabolic collapse in middle age. They didn't live with lifelong autoimmune confusion. They didn't normalize digestive pain. They didn't accept obesity as fate. Those are modern adaptations, not to abundance, but to distortion. Here is the quiet tragedy. The solutions are not exotic. They are inconvenient. Slow fermentation doesn't scale well. Whole grains spoil faster. Diverse crops resist monoculture. Traditional fats cost more. Local food systems don't maximize quarterly profit, which is why the industrial system resists them. Instead, we are sold substitutes, gluten-free products made from refined starch, fortified with synthetic nutrients, stabilized with gums and emulsifiers. Ultra-processed foods pretending to be ancient. The body is not fooled. Every time symptoms return, the blame shifts back to the individual. You didn't avoid enough foods. You didn't supplement correctly. You didn't follow the plan strictly. But medieval health didn't require discipline. It required structure. A food system that constrained behavior into biological sanity. Our system does the opposite. So the real lesson from medieval diets is not about going backward. It's about remembering constraints that protected human biology and intentionally rebuilding them. Eat food that spoils. Respect fermentation. Let digestion start before chewing. Allow hunger and fullness to exist again. Choose ingredients that look boring to marketers. This isn't romantic, it's practical. The modern world excels at emergency medicine and acute intervention. But chronic disease is not an emergency problem. It is a systems problem. And systems are changed upstream, where food is grown, processed, and normalized. Medieval people didn't optimize health. They lived inside boundaries that did it for them. We dismantled those boundaries in the name of efficiency and paid for it with our bodies. The point is not to recreate the Middle Ages. The point is to ask a dangerous question. If people survived on bread, porridge, and simple fats for centuries without metabolic collapse, what does that say about the food we now call modern? Once you ask that question honestly, there is no going back. Because the body remembers what real food feels like, even if the culture has forgotten. And when food becomes food again, health stops being a mystery.